We're living in a strange time, working for a strange goal. We're living in a strange time, we're working for a strange goal. We're turning flesh and body into soul.
Hi there, this is Bill Ryan from Project Avalon. And the video you're about to see is an interview with a most remarkable woman who I've come to know recently and has become a close friend. And the subject of the interview is her mission to this planet and the abilities that she possesses, which are extraordinary and significant. And in the 2 hours which follows, she details what she can do, what she has done, the fun and the problems that she experienced when she was a little girl, and what she is doing responsibly with her considerable powers right now. And it's a most extraordinary story that I recommend you listen to right to the end. The reason why I'm giving this little introduction right now is because it's really important to emphasize that the most extraordinary psychic abilities which are recounted in this interview, they are not the gifts of an extraordinarily special person which we can't possibly aspire to. These gifts are innate in all human beings. This is Inelia's message to us. She claims that although she comes from an unusual place, let us say, and this is an unusual mission, it's an unusual lifetime, the gifts that she possesses are human ones. And a message that she wants us all to understand is that these gifts are our birthright, that the controllers of the planet do not want us to know that we have, and they use them, of course, themselves. The other important note to the interview is that magic, for lack of a better word, is interesting and spectacular and has fascinated human beings for generations, for thousands of years, for understandable reasons. It's not an end in itself. It's important to understand that, as Inelia says in her interview, these abilities will be gained as byproducts by anyone who is on a genuine spiritual path. And of course, many of the great masters in many traditions will attest to that. They're interesting, but they're not an end in itself, and they're not to be attained as a goal in themselves. That would be a trap. That's a dead end. That actually goes nowhere, apart from probably to fulfill the needs of the ego. And as you listen to Inelia telling her story, you will see that there is very, very little ego there. She tells her story in a very matter-of-fact way, that you too can do exactly as she does. You too have these capacities for changing the universe around you. And you too have the capacity, as she says, to create your own timeline. You can create your own future. And between us, taking full responsibility and standing in our own power, we can create the world that we want. Thank you. So this is Bill Ryan from Project Avalon, and it is the 10th of March 2011, and I'm here with Inelia. And Inelia, could you possibly say your most wonderful melodic family name that I'm incapable of pronouncing?
Okay, my full name is Inelia del Pilar Ahumada Avila, and I'm also known as Inelia Benz.
All right, and you were born in Chile, is that right?
Yes.
Okay, and then to cut a very long story short, which is a different story, you left Chile as a refugee, right?
Yes.
And ended up in England, is that correct?
We moved to Nottingham in England, and I kind of grew up there. I was there for quite a few years, And then I moved to Ireland for 9 years, and I went to college in Ireland. And then I went back to Chile for a couple of years as an adult to sort out some family properties and things. Then I went to live in Spain for a few years, and then back to England. And I've been in the United States now for 6 years.
And how is all this possible, given that you look as if you're 22 years old?
Oh, okay. Well, you don't ask a lady her age, so I'm not going to tell you. But I'm not young.
You're not
but thank
young.
you very much.
Okay. So, the reason why I'm talking to you here and would love to see whether we can describe some of the things that you have been doing and being in language so that people can understand it. You, may I say it, are one of the more extraordinary people I've ever met, and I've met quite a few extraordinary people. And from what I can gather, you wouldn't even really describe yourself as a person in a funny kind of way. Now that's going to sound weird to the people watching this.
Right, yes. Yeah, because when I look at a person or I look at people on Earth, normally, and this is not always the case, there would have been a soul or like a spark of divinity entering the time-space line, and it would have gone from complete oneness to a period of maybe thousands, I don't know how many lifetimes, developing into an individual and developing into a sentient being, which is separate from oneness. And this, when I look at people on the planet, this has happened sometimes on planet Earth. A lot of people have done the entire trajectory on the planet Earth. And now we are seeing like thousands, if not millions, of people who have done their trajectories in other planets and now are incarnated on Earth to experience this amazing stuff that's going on right now here. And so I would consider one of these souls that have evolved throughout time and space to become a sentient and evolved being as a person or a being, right? And I wouldn't describe myself as such because I came in directly without any evolution into this state to be able to do a particular job on the planet right now. And once that job is gone, that individuality, that singularity that is this person that you're seeing, we no longer exist. So the concept of a person or a soul is not there.
Okay, so one or two people who followed this may already be doing a double take. You're not only saying that you haven't been here on this planet before, ever incarnated, but you haven't been anywhere in the physical universe ever before, or anywhere in the whole matrix of existence, as it were, before. You are absolutely new here.
Correct, yeah. I entered the time-space matrix, as you know, that's a good word, half an hour before I was born.
Right. And you know, this is what you've told me when we've talked about this off camera, that you will not be incarnating again. You're here on a specific, dare I call it a mission?
Yes, you could call it a mission. Yeah.
So you're here to get some things done that need to be done.
Right.
And you have come directly from, here we're struggling with words, you come directly from source, directly from unity, directly here into a human body, and are therefore operating in a very different way than human beings do who've been here for millions of lifetimes.
Yes, yeah. And my entire early trajectory and still going on, something that's still continuing, is learning or being able to function within an individual viewpoint, an individual body, and within time-space in a linear manner, and dealing with that, being able to function within it, because that's where the job is at. So my trajectory has been to learn how to do that, rather than what would people would normally think us the other way around, you know.
And that must have been extraordinarily challenging, to come in from nowhere and no when directly into being a very young human girl on this strange planet Earth with no manual guidelines or information about how it is you were meant to be or what you were meant to be.
Yeah, there was definitely a challenge, and the main challenge was the reaction of others around me towards me. Okay, so for example, I did have some tools. I did come in with some tools. I was able to download information. So if I didn't understand something, normally I would be able to just tap into the collective and get it. I was speaking, according to one of my aunts, I was talking like completely perfect Spanish. It was in fact, didn't even have a Chilean accent when I was 9 months old, which for her, she was totally freaked out about it, but nobody else seemed to take any notice. And that was because I was trying to understand what people were saying or what they were trying to communicate, and I couldn't. So I simply downloaded the language and used it, you know. So I can't do that anymore with languages, unfortunately. I don't, you know, there's one of those things that I can't do, but for other things I can. And growing up, I think that was part of the way things work, that I was able to, the things that I needed, I get. But if I'm doing something just because, or, you know, because it's something that I'm interested in, but it's not needed, then I can't do it.
If it's necessary, you'll download the program that you need in order to do the job.
Right.
But if you're just curious, then it doesn't work.
It doesn't work.
Okay.
It doesn't happen.
I remember there was a time that you told me a couple of weeks ago about, there was once when you found yourself, when you were told that you were speaking perfect Portuguese, another time when you were told that you were speaking Russian,
right.
And you didn't even realize it.
Yeah, to me, I was speaking English, right? For me, when I look back and I look at my memory, I'm speaking in English, but to the witnesses, I was speaking this other language, which for me is like, okay, I take their word, and I've read about it, and I've found out that there's other people that can do that type of thing, but it's like evidence from somewhere else, you know. It's like, it's not something I can say, yeah, I can do that, because as far as I was concerned, I was speaking English, so.
Yes, sure, it
Yeah.
wasn't even conscious.
No, and it's always been a situation where the other person needs help.
Okay.
So it was like a person who was very sick. He had a terminal illness. That was the first time that it was seen. And apparently I was talking to this person in Portuguese for hours, and I had no idea. And other people, again, they were coming in for help or advice. And the last time, it was very simple. It was somebody in the metro in Madrid who were lost.
Mm-hmm.
They were in the metro and they were completely lost, this family. And I went to help them. And I started giving them directions, showing them how to use the map and where they had to go and everything, and send them on their merry way, say goodbye, turned around, and the person who was with me says, "Did you know where did you learn Russian? Did you know you were talking in Russian?" I said, "No."
It's a wonderful
Yeah.
story. There's another wonderful story which I invite you to tell, and I have to say here on record that I've been talking with Inelia about her experiences for several weeks now, and we haven't got to the end of those stories yet. There are so many of them. One of them that I think is a really neat story is when you were a little girl and you kept on falling over.
Yes. One of the things that I tried to do, because you have to understand, I came in like half an hour before the body was born. And then there had to be a body agreement for me to come in, because it wasn't your regular incarnation where the soul would be there waiting for the body, or like there's a link between the two and everything. And there was this moment of asking for agreement from the body to take this on. It's like, shall we do this? And there was a definite yes. But it was completely different to how I see humans functioning, because I came in and I had no idea how to drive the body, right? So the body kind of intelligence went into the physical body to animate it, to make it alive and to make it function and breathe and everything else. And I was kind of outside and I wanted to do stuff with this body, but I didn't know how. I didn't have the manual. And when I looked into it, it was like a computer that needed to be programmed, right? It needed to learn how to move its arms, grab things, you know, be able to speak and communicate, move the head sideways when I was interested in something that was going on there. And I didn't know how to move this little body's head that way so I could see it, right? And stuff like that. But I was, from that moment, I was not inside the vision, the visuals were outside the body on the back of the head from that moment. And the only thing that changed was that I was trying to move the arms like a puppet, and it just wasn't working, and the body was complaining. So it kind of told me, no, you have to go in and move the arms from within, kind of thing, you know, like getting into a suit. So I did that, but I didn't do it from a viewpoint. I didn't do my viewpoint. I just did like an energy entering, so I was able to move the arms and legs, and it was like programming the body how to function and stuff like that. Very mechanical. It was literally like writing a program on a computer. For me, that's how it was. And the years went by, and I used to see everything. I had a like 360 degree and up and down visual of everything that was going on around me. And I kept falling over time and again because my viewpoint was around here, so I couldn't see what was in front of me as I was walking in the street, for example, and because the head was on the way, right? So I kept falling over, and I had continuously, my knees were always bleeding, and my face was always smashed, my lips were always fat because I kept falling on my head. And then one day my mom says, why can't you use your eyes? You know, just use your eyes, look at what's in front of you. So I said to her, well, I can't, because when I looked through my eyes, it was like two tiny little pinpricks that you can only see a tiny little bit of what's going on. And then she says, well, what are you doing now? So I said, well, I can see everything. And she, you know, and then again, you know, it's like it was like, I can't remember the exact conversation, but it went something like, well, get into your body right now and use your eyes, you know, just start using your eyes. And being I think it was just before I started school, so I was about 4 years old. Being a child, 4 years old, you do what your mommy tells you. So I did that, and for me it was horrible. I could hardly see anything, and I had to point my head everywhere so I could see what was going on, you know. And I couldn't turn my head all the way around, so I never knew what was going on behind me. It was very disconcerting for quite a long time. But I stopped falling over because I could see what was in front of me.
And even now, you can leave your body anytime you want to, go wandering around and travel around the universe and see everything you want to see, right?
Yes, yes. And I kind of have to do that because otherwise it's a little bit claustrophobic to be here all the time.
It's claustrophobic in this human body. It's like
Yes.
you're kind of trapped in this limited jail cell, this
Right.
machine. It's like being in a car with very small windows.
Yeah, very small windows, and like something's put over your ears so you can't hear everything, and you know, or feel anything. It's like sensory deprivation.
Right. So you have these extraordinary gifts that, of course, I understand that these are natural abilities that all spiritual beings have. But most people who've been in bodies for millions of lifetimes have completely lost these abilities. They can't even, it's not even real for them that they're there.
Right.
And you're coming in fresh with this huge toolkit of things that every spiritual being can do.
Yes.
What else can you do?
You have to be more specific.
Okay. There's a wonderful story that you told when you were watching a television program. It's such a great story.
Well, I'm a bit of a TV addict, unfortunately, like in the purest sense of the word, that if somebody switches a TV in front of me, it's like I get hooked on it and I can't detach from, especially if it's a program that I want to see. If there's something I'm not interested in, I can just walk away, but if it's a movie, normally movies or shows on the History Channel, or something that grabs my attention on the television, I cannot walk away from it. And if anybody comes in and tries to change the channel, I got a little bit angry, or not angry, but I stopped them. And there was this incident. It was 2001, I think, where I was watching a show, and this person comes in, and he grabs the remote control, and I can see this in the corner of my eye because I'm kind of watching the show, and I said, "Don't change the channel," right? And he says, "Well, I came home to watch blah blah," and he goes to change the channel, and I said, "Don't touch that remote control." And he was about to press the button, and then he just drops the the control on the floor and goes, "Ow, ow," and looks at it, and he's like, "That burnt," And then he picks up the remote control, opens it, and it's all melted inside. And he says, "Why did you do that? You couldn't have just told me." And I said, "I told you not to touch the button." And it was just one of those things, It's like,
just like a reaction.
It was a reaction, yeah. Don't touch my remote, So yeah, I mean, those things are there, and they're not really to be used as such. Anybody who reaches a certain level of awareness can do this stuff. It's part of the human toolkit. It's not something that I brought in from outside. This is all wired into every human being. And this is part of the human toolkits that are being suppressed and invalidated in everybody, and people are taught that they don't exist, taught that they're not able to do these things. And a pattern that I've seen that's really interesting is that somebody who's in a spiritual road to become enlightened, or like to spiritual evolution, a road of spiritual evolution, will always, without fail, develop all these things, without fail. But somebody who goes out of their way to develop these things are not necessarily developing the spiritual evolution side. So they're not, like, they don't go together, but somehow the person who goes for a spiritual evolution path will always develop these abilities.
It's a natural byproduct.
It's a natural byproduct of developing in a spiritual way.
Yes.
But someone who just goes out and wants to learn telekinesis and whatever, and move things around, or read people's mind, or go and do remote viewing, and they can actually, anybody can do it. They can go out and learn these things, and there's some fabulous tools and books out there that can teach them to do these things, but they don't necessarily develop their spirit by doing it.
Totally understood.
Yeah.
And your telepathic abilities must be very highly advanced. Presumably you can look into anyone's mind and read anything you want to.
Right, that's a really interesting way to put it, because telepathy is not about going into somebody's mind and seeing what's there, because the person's mind is not what holds the memories and feelings and emotions. So even looking at it that way, you're going to be extremely limited to what you can do in a telepathic way. You may be able to do card reading. If somebody's playing cards, you can look into their cards because they're looking at it at that moment, right? Normally, if somebody's told, "Oh, Inelia can read minds," whatever they're trying to hide comes up, like right in front of them. So that will be broadcast, and I can pick that up. But how telepathy really works is the best way that I can describe it would be...
It's a merge.
Yeah, it's more like a merge of mind, a merge of beings more than mind, because a merge perhaps even into the collective where the other person is, right? And then once there, you don't necessarily pick up sentences. You can pick up visuals, feelings, memories, and sometimes actual thoughts as well. like what the person's thinking at that precise moment.
The way that I understand this from the conversations that we've had about this is it's like you temporarily step sideways and you be that person. You sort of become that person, and then you can access what they access.
Yes.
Is that anywhere close?
It's a little bit like that, but what you're describing is actually the sessions that I do, where the person, the space between the two individuals it's made non-existent, as it were, and then the person and I would become one, or would actually, if you look at it in another way, the person is raised to a level of oneness where they can have access to all this information and tools, right? And I would have access to them in that moment as well.
Okay. So the process, for example, of looking into someone's life and being able to watch it, to see anything that you want to see or that they want you to see, a little bit like watching a movie. You can go to any point on it.
Right.
If it's a movie that you've downloaded and you're looking at it on your computer, you can say, right, I go to this point here.
Yes, it's a little, well, it's not quite like that, because if we look at it on a way of time, the time track, for example, a person's life track, whether in this lifetime or whether their entire life track, backwards and forwards. Forwards is really is a little bit more difficult to see, because we have so many timelines branching off at any one moment, that one thing that the person thinks or says or decides will change that timeline, right? So to look forward in that person's timeline is the most probable timeline if nothing changes, right? But looking backwards is quite easy, because they're here through having having traveled through this particular timeline, one specific one. They can actually go sideways and look at their own parallel timelines, things they would have done if they had done things differently. And also look and see, if they want to do something differently, have a look at a timeline where they did that differently and see, get all that information and then do it here, recreate it. But looking at somebody's timeline is slightly different to what I've seen other people do. When I've seen psychics look at timelines, they look, like you said, they look like a movie. They go into what's called the Akashic Records and look at it like a movie. While when I do it, I actually go there. I actually go to that point in time and look at that moment like a bilocation. So I'm actually there.
A bilocation in time as well?
In time-space, yeah. In time-space. So I would actually be there, and it's really, I have to be extremely careful when I do that, because if the person is really psychic, they will see me and they will say, "You were there!" And that happened to me recently.
Yes.
The second that I looked at the person, she turned around to me and says, "You were there."
Yes.
You know? And of course I hadn't been before I did it, but she picked it up that I was there at that moment.
Yes.
So I have to be really careful, because it can change things. It can change the past, it can change the future.
So you have to be careful only to be an observer and to leave absolutely no footprints.
No
or
footprints,
nothing.
yeah.
And now, Whitley Strieber, in his work, his website, unknowncountry.com, he was one person among a number of commentators who described very graphically one night a few years ago. He had this extraordinary vivid dream, and dream in inverted commas, and in this vivid dream he experienced himself one after the other in different realities. There was one when his wife, I can't actually remember the details, there's one when either his wife was sick or had died, there was another when they were living in poverty, another one when they were living in a different place and he was doing something different. And it's like he went on this kind of guided tour in this vivid dream, all these different lifetimes. I think there were 6 of them, something like that. And then he returned, and he was so shocked and he was so struck by this experience that then he wrote it up. And what he explained, like his own explanation for himself and for his readers, was that the way to think of a person going forward through time is not as like a train going along a track, like one point going forwards, but more like a wave front breaking on a big wide beach, and that at different parts of this beach you've got these different timelines, these different experiences that are kind of that are manifesting themselves. And what you're saying then is not only you're affirming this is a fully fledged reality, but you can, when you're working with somebody, you can look sideways and you can see what's there.
Yes, yes. And I mean, even science now is accepting the quantum reality, right? The quantum physics talks about multiple realities, and that's something that, for me, it's real. I can tap into it in my own life and see different things that I want to find out about, right? I can go to different ones where that happened already and get some advice from that other Inelia, how she handled X, or how does she do this or that. And it could be really practical things like playing the violin, making a meal, playing in the stock market, you know. It was really funny because when I went to the Inelia that's really good at the stock market game, after a short conversation she said, "Don't do it. You're useless, just don't do it." And she was right, you know. I did try to do it and it was a total disaster. I shouldn't have.
So you had one version of yourself giving advice to the other version of yourself, which is the you that we're talking to right now.
Right, exactly. And anybody can do this. Anybody can do this. You can think, okay, so I want a reality where I am doing my dharmic work 100%. And again, you have to be really specific, because your dharmic work would probably be different in each one of the timelines. If not completely different, then maybe a little different, right? So for example, if you're an artist, you could say, how do I use my art to help people evolve or awaken, something like that. So, okay, so I'm going to tap into the live stream where I have done this, where my art awakens people, and I'm going to really successfully, and I can make a living out of it. Not just a living, but I can make a fabulous income that I can then reinvest and reuse to do even more things in the world. So you can go into that timeline and have a really long conversation with this other person that is you, that's already achieved it, and come back with all that information and just do it on this one.
And so what you're saying here is you've got a whole load of parallel Inelias living alternative sliding doors type lives. This is a reference to Sliding Doors, the movie. Mm-hmm. Except they're not two timelines, they're many.
Infinite.
Infinite. Okay. Infinite. But the one thing that is in common with the Inelia in all of those different parallel lives is that you are here to do a job, and it doesn't really matter whether you're playing the violin, cooking a meal, or doing art. Those are those are the bells and whistles and the wrapping on that life, right?
Right.
So what are you here to do? Because so far we've talked about some of the peripheral aspects of this that are curious and interesting and fascinating to many people. But what are you really here to do?
I only have one job, and that's to raise the vibrational level of the planet, including the human collective, which is part of the planet, to a critical point that will allow a transition into the new paradigm, a new level of awareness for everything, for the planet and every being in it, every rock, every insect, every person. And that's my only job, and I will do anything and will basically, yeah, I will do anything to achieve that. If it means helping somebody who's already awakened and aware and enlightened to reach an even higher level of vibration, then I will do that. And if it means waking somebody who was previously asleep and that will raise their level of vibration, I will do that. If it means going to a geographical area and cleansing it so that the vibration can come through properly, I will do that. I don't have one attachment, or the only thing that I'm here to do is raise the overall level of vibration, and that's it.
Now, I've got a million questions to ask you about that, but first let me ask you, how old were you when you first knew that that was what you were here to do?
I always knew it, but I didn't know how to put it into words, because growing up, it wasn't something that the family would talk about. My parents were very rational. They were mathematicians and physicists. They were professors. They weren't into spirituality. They weren't into the vibration of the planet or anything like that. So as a child, I didn't have a concept of how to translate what I was here to do. However, I used to do it. If I saw somebody sick, I would sit next to them so that their level of vibration would be, would rise, and I would do that naturally throughout my entire childhood and through my teenage years and later on.
So you just kind of move into situation and you'd heal people and you'd help people and you'd
Right.
nudge situations along.
Right. Basically, yes.
And then, if I understand it right, a little later on, you would do work that could be regarded as being more major, more fundamental, more far-reaching. Is that right?
Yes. I was always working in the background. I was told very early on that I had to kind of wear a mask, and I mustn't show what I was or who I was for many, many years. And that mask, I was asked to remove it in 2002 or 3 or something. And before that, I was working very much on a one-to-one basis with people and doing psychic activism on very quietly, not telling anybody about it.
Okay. And that begs a question. You're saying that you were told to do this or that.
Right.
Who were you told by? How were you told?
This is, yeah, I suppose that's a very interesting question. The information comes through very clearly, normally accompanied by synchronistic events that if I miss it, I will be told over and over again. Like a book would fall off the shelf, and a child would say the same sentence at the same time. That was the title of the book. A radio would be blaring and there would be a song that was talking about the same thing. So I was actually told things very clearly, but a lot of the time with regards, that would be more like practical things. Say, go to the park and sit on the bench. There'll be a girl sitting down next to you having her lunch and she needs you to sit next to her, you know. I would get that information and I would do it, and sure enough the girl would turn up, like she would be the visual that I had received, and just sit there eating her lunch and then go away, and that's all that was needed.
And you would, and maybe, I mean, just using that example of the girl on the bench as an example, you wouldn't know why, and you might not ever know why.
Right. And I never needed to know why.
It was just an assignment.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you're always totally certain at a level of knowing that when you are given one of these assignments, the right thing to do is just not question it,
right,
not attach anything to it, and just do it. Is that right?
Yes. There was a time when I was a teenager. Every teenager rebels, right? And parts of my life had to be about learning to be a human. So I had to go through that rebellious time, and I rebelled against all this too. It's like I would be told, you have to walk very quietly and very gently and not make any waves in the astral. So I would go in blaring, and singing and dancing and jumping on everything. It's like, and making a lot of noise in the astral.
In the astral.
Yes. Stuff like that, you know, like
Right.
a teenager, right?
Okay.
And there were a few points where I was asked to do certain things, and I said no, I don't want to, I don't feel like it, I'm watching TV or whatever, you know, I'm listening to music, or the typical, you know, when your mum clean the room, you know, yeah, whatever. And I went through that at this level, which is kind of a little bit comical if you think about it, because, you know, here's this being who's supposed to do this big job and is going through the teenage rebellious stage, you know. And but I learned very quickly that I shouldn't do that because things went terribly wrong when I did, you know, say no. And it was really it's a little bit comical, I suppose, once I said something wicked to my mother, you know, and I knew I mustn't say it, you know, and I can't remember what it was, and my hand just came up and slapped me across the face, and I went, oh, you know, that hurt. And it wasn't really nasty, it was just a little something that you feel inside, I shouldn't have done that, you know. It was just a little something. I can't remember what it was. It was probably something like, oh, you have a grey hair, and, you know, whatever, you know, something to do with her appearance probably. Just to be wicked, you know, just to be...
And then you immediately slapped yourself in the face. That's all.
That's the really funny one. It really hurt. But the other times, when it was something more serious, and I wasn't listening, there was a sense of urgency. Like, do it now, do it, and it was like a growing urgency that if you don't do it, something terrible is going to happen, right? And I wasn't able to switch that off, so it would just get worse and worse and worse, and I had to then like run to the place or whatever and be there, you know. And then of course I'd be out of breath, and you know. So I learned very quickly that it wasn't really my choice. It wasn't something that I had a saying in. And then we come into the other side of that, where's the free will and that, right? And we talked about that a little bit before, but with regards to, you know, doing the things that I was told to do, there's a very, very good way to tell what is ego telling you something to do, you know, telling you to do something. If it's ego, if it's some other negative entity trying to take you over to do bad things, or maybe things that you think are good but really are not, or if it's really from source, which is how I would describe it, you know. We can give it lots of names. I find that people understand it better if I say my guides or my higher self is saying this right now, and they will understand that, and it is true. It is true. That's what happens. And I didn't need to translate it or give it a personality, so it wouldn't, even though I would say my guide is telling me to do this now, I can describe it, and it describes it perfectly. For me, it wasn't an entity guide. It was just the same thing, but if you take the identity away, and it would just be the thing. That's how it would come through. And the really good way to distinguish between that pure energy from source that is your guide or your higher self, and ego or another negative entity that's trying to influence you, is to listen to your bodies. And the best way to learn how to do that is to go into a very, very open space within yourself, and then tell yourself a lie. You know, instead of saying, you know, your name's Bill, you say my name is George, and that will resonate wrong somehow, somewhere. Will feel odd. It will feel wrong, and then you know when it's true and when it's not, when it's source and when it isn't, when it's you, the genuine higher self you, and when it isn't.
It's actually like what they do to calibrate a lie detector.
Ah, there you go.
They do the same thing.
Right.
They ask somebody to deliberately tell a lie so that they see the reaction on the machine. And in fact, you do this with pendulums as well. Sometimes
Yes,
you can do the
right.
same, yeah.
That's a very good way to put it, yeah. Yeah.
I understand. Now, okay, so if we take the girl on the park bench as an example, when you get a knowing, a direct knowing that that is what you must do, and you go there, and sure enough, there she is, and something happens, presumably, and you may not know what that is, and then the girl goes away, and then that's the end of your job.
Yes.
You may have cured her, or healed her, or stopped her from killing herself, or resolved a problem, or something. But what is that process? How does it work? How can you explain this? How can you explain what's happening?
The best way to describe it would be that my focus goes to her. And I am there 110% in every dimension, in every time space for that moment. That's how I can, but I don't do anything. I don't have any intention. I don't have any attachment to outcome. I don't have any curiosity. Nothing. It's just complete focus. And what appears to happen is that there's something else, whatever it is, the divine force, energy, chi, whatever, comes through and directly into her to resolve and do whatever that I have no idea what it is. And then it's done.
There must be some examples that you could give where you did actually get feedback on that and you did see the transformational effect. Can you share some examples of that?
Yes. For example, yeah, there is an example, and it goes back to the person who spoke Portuguese when I was a teenager. I must have been about 12 or 13 years old at the time. Let me think. I think I was 13, but I could have been 12. And my mum used to be a very outgoing person, very extroverted, and she used to have parties at our house most weekends. So there was always a party at our house, and there would be like 50 people plus at the parties. And that moment, normally, because I'm not an extrovert, I would go into the room and I would scan the room and see who wasn't vibrating at a high level or who was vibrating at the lowest level, and I would just go and sit next to them. That's what I would do.
Just because you wanted to?
Yeah, that was the natural thing for me to do.
Okay.
That's what I was here for, I suppose, right?
Okay.
It's like, why do we breathe, you know? Because you need to. Or because it's something that we do. And so I would sit next to them and I would sense their vibration going higher and higher and higher. Occasionally I would look and see kind of shadow bits, and I would kind of move those out of the way, but only if I was told. You know, it's like, oh, look at that focus on that little bit there, you know, and as I was looking at it, it would just dissolve and go away. But with this person, I was sitting next to him, like I said, for about an hour or two, and we were talking away. We had a huge long conversation all about different things, different topics and stuff, and all of a sudden he turns around to me and he says, "Where did you learn Portuguese?" And I look at him and says, "Never, I can't speak Portuguese." And he says, "Oh, but you've been speaking Portuguese to me for the past hour, 2 hours." And I look at him and says, "No, I haven't." You know, at the time my main language was Spanish, so I said, I was actually speaking Spanish. And he says, "No, you weren't. I can't speak Spanish. You've been speaking to me in Portuguese." And I said, at that moment I thought, okay, this guy's a little bit of a nutter. So I'll just quietly get up and go to the other side of the room, right? So that's what I said. I said, "Oh, well, it was nice meeting you." And I got up and I moved to the other side of the room. A few days later, I think it might have been about a week later, he came back to the house and he had a conversation with my mother, and I kind of listened in, and he said that when he was at the party, and for like 4 months he had known that he had a terminal illness, and he only had like weeks to live. I don't know what the illness was. that he had gone back to the doctor after the party and he no longer had a terminal illness. He was cured. There was nothing wrong with him. And
he just disappeared.
He had just disappeared. And he immediately knew that it had been me, according to him, right? Because he was from Brazil, and in Brazil they have a lot of knowledge about healers and what healers can do. And according to him, one of the things that these people can do is speak in different languages. That there's special kids and adults that can talk to the patient in their own language, naturally. So he knew, he had put two and two together, and he came back and he wanted to thank me and, you know, for healing him and stuff like that. And then, so that was a feedback of something that had happened that I had no idea what was happening at the time, right? I had no idea that he was sick, and I had no idea that he had been healed. And even up to today, my memory is that I was speaking in Spanish. So I had no idea that I was speaking in Portuguese. So, and really, it was irrelevant. I didn't need to know any of that stuff. I really didn't. But I found out, and then other things have happened. And occasionally, people will come up and say, you know, this happened or whatever. And sometimes a third person that didn't know that I had done a certain psychic mission will come up later and tell me, say something like, I just had a dream and I know I have to tell you this dream. I've been told that I have to tell you this dream. And it's normally the conclusion to the work that I've done. So they tell me what happened, you know. And it's really interesting because normally I'm not curious. I'm not curious about what's happening or to get validation or objective proof. But what I've found out is that sometimes that validation and objective proof is necessary for others.
In which case then it manifests as part of the whole package.
Right, right.
I understand. That's fascinating.
Yeah.
That's really fascinating.
Yeah.
And okay, so just then you gave the example of somebody who was physically relieved of an illness, was cured of an illness, just because you sat with him and talked with him for a couple of hours.
Yes.
What sorts of other transformational things might happen? I mean, I presume it's much more than just physical healing.
Yes. There will be like a disentangling of energy sometimes in the person, so they can think more clearly. And occasionally I will be sent to a light worker who needs to finish a mission, or who needs to continue a mission that they're about to drop, right? And that's happened a few times, and it has manifested in different ways. And
so it's like a support structure for
right.
people who are already doing good work.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Because you see, like a light worker, especially somebody who has a very big mission, will have there will be entities and people trying to stop them, right? And there are points in time that they could have been taken out of that mission, either physically, completely, or by just killing their will to carry on in that mission. Or even there's juncture points where the person is about to start their mission, and they're in that kind of decision-making point, and so much negativity is injected into them that they will probably decide not to do it. So I come in and counter that negativity so that they can make a free will choice.
Without being negatively influenced.
Right.
So
right.
So it's like you shield them from the negative influence, which then allows them to make their free will decision.
Exactly. And then they can decide to go ahead, and they can decide not to go ahead, but it's their free will. It's an inner decision, not forced by the negativity that's coming their way.
Do you have any idea or suspicions or knowledge that there are some fairly large things that you have done, some fairly major things that, I mean, not just related, for instance, to one person's personal life, but to something that's much more far-reaching than that?
I'm not really understanding the question, because it's all about individual beings at the end of the day. I mean, there's different things that I do. All I do is just focus my attention on something or someone, and then that something or someone will be able to resolve, you know, their vibration. It's all, and then we have to go back to what is it all for, and it's all about raising the level of vibration of the planet. So, for example, if I focus my attention on an extremely negative being, right, which did happen recently, well, actually I've done that quite a bit, but there was one that was really big, a really big negative being, and when my attention focuses on it, it's like the entire universe looks at it, this being, and then that being can do various things. They can dissolve into oneness. They can drop the body and leave, and go and reincarnate in a planet where it's okay to be negative, but it's not okay to do it now on the planet Earth at that level, right? And or they can ask for clemency, and they can be transformed into a light being. And so recently I had an experience where I was asked to hang out with this extremely negative being, like really, really negative person on the planet. At a psychic level, it wasn't you know, an everyday level. I mean, this person was extremely powerful in every level. On a social level, psychic level, mystical level, very, very powerful, very, very dark.
And without going into all the details, unless you want to, what was the outcome of that assignment, of that mission with that person?
That was a very interesting outcome, because one of the things that I was asked to do was to hang out with this person on his space. And I didn't want to do that because it was like an icky yucky person, you know, very negative. He was showing me stuff that was horrible about the things that I used to do, or he did in life to others on a mass scale. And so I was kind of not wanting to hang out with him. And then it came through, I talked to a friend of mine who's a very, very in-tuned psychic, and also very highly aware. And I was telling her this tale, and I said, well, it feels almost like this guy has all this power. It's like he's the most powerful person on the planet, but he can't tell anybody about it, and he wants me to write the book about what he can do and what he has done in life. And she said, you know, I feel really strongly that you have to do that. I think that you have to sit with him and let him write this book. And this is sitting with him and writing the book would be at a very psychic level, right? We would be hanging out at a psychic level, and he would be dictating this book to me. So I did that. I hung out with him, and for a few weeks I was taking down notes, and it was the most horrendous things that this person was doing. And then I went on to Google and I did a little bit of research, and this stuff is documented, you know. It's like there's people out there who are writing about this is what's going on and this is what these people are doing, you know. We're talking about human sacrifice and like children being sacrificed, and you know, their blood drunk and stuff like that, you know. It's just like totally out of this world things that I would never have imagined were happening on the planet. And this is the bloke we were talking about. After a few weeks, I had this experience where I came out of the body and I was sent to this huge mansion. Now, when I see a mansion, it's normally how I interpret it is that it's the person's being, the person's maybe body and life. And this was a huge mansion, and there was this other person outside it. It was like a man, and he was. I saw, when I looked at him, I thought, oh, there's like a psychic there, and he had all these books and crosses and stuff, and he was waiting to get into the house to get rid of this being, right? And then I thought, oh my goodness, if he goes into that house, his French fries, it's like he's gonna be completely destroyed. He has to stay here. So I kind of conveyed that image to him: stay here, don't go in the house. And he did. He stayed there, and I went inside myself, and it was all darkness. It was very evil energy. And when I walk into that situation, you see, there's no judgment. The moment you inject judgment into darkness, you're gone. You're destroyed. You can't be there. It was just energy. It was like I'm floating in blueness, or in redness, or in greenness. That's how I experienced it. Intellectually, I knew, oh, this is what evil is. This is what color evil is, or whatever, you know. This is how it feels to the finger. This is how it feels against my skin, you know. And I walked through the house, and I found him sitting on a throne in a room. And he was just sitting there, and he was looking at me. And it was all like the complete energy was of pure, unadulterated evil. And I sat next to him, and I just looked. I was just looking at him, and he was looking at me. And I had no agenda. I didn't know what was going to happen or anything. I was just sitting with him. And all of a sudden, he sent a feeling, an image of a request of clemency. It took me by surprise. And as soon as he did that, I felt this huge rush of energy, chi, that was pure, unconditional love towards him. And it just infused him with that light. And it was just, whoa, you know, it's like it was out of this world. And I was gone out of there. I was back in my body, and I went, whoa, what was that about? You know, what happened to him? And of course then the human part comes in and says, you know, how come that happened? You know, I would have killed him or whatever. Look at all the nasty things he did. And you know, I kind of went through that little time of human emotion or whatever.
Reacting as a human.
Yeah, reacting as a human for a split second. It was like a split second of, how can this be? You know, this person has done all this through thousands of years, and he's giving clemency and beautified, you know. But that's why the part of the part of judgment or human side or body cannot come into the equation when I do this work, because that would have destroyed this human, and it would have not done the work, which is to raise the level of vibration on the planet. And by taking that whole negative thing and turning it into light, it raises it a lot.
Yeah.
So job completed.
And humans have been judging each other for thousands of years, if not much longer, and it hasn't changed anything at all.
It hasn't changed a thing. And the most interesting thing, and this comes back to objective proof, it was subjective proof, but it was from somebody else. A friend of mine who's also a psychic, she called me with one of those dreams that she absolutely had to tell me. She emailed me, she didn't call me. She emailed me, and she said, I've got to tell you this dream. I don't know what it's about, I don't know what it means, but I know I have to share it with you. She said that she had gone into a huge mansion, a big mansion, with myself and this other person who was a well-known psychic, a man. And we were walking around the mansion, and she said she's a feng shui expert. How do you pronounce that? Feng shui?
Feng shui.
Feng shui.
I believe.
Okay, so she's a feng shui expert. So she knows about energies in a house. When she goes into a house, she will read the energies with her psychic awareness and then make the changes to change that. She was walking around this house, and she said it was squeaky clean. It was completely empty and clean, like there was no energies in it. And she could see where the paintings had been taken down from the walls, and everything had been taken away. And when one of the things that had happened was that when this thing had completed with this mansion and the person had been infused with light, it felt as though he had been given clemency and he had taken all his assets with him. And now she was relaying this dream about what was, the conclusion of the other thing. So I kind of got my answer,
Yes.
What happened. Yeah, there he was.
And so, just to summarize on that, this mansion that you visited, this was a real place. This wasn't kind of symbolic astral situation.
Right.
This was a real mansion in the physical universe, and he was really there in a body, sitting on his throne. And then astrally, or in some non-physical form, you then sat next to him, but he knew that you were there.
Yes.
As a human being in real time, he knew that you were there.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
He was extremely aware. He knew, yes.
Mm-hmm. So that's an example, if I understand what you're saying, that just by being physically alongside that person and focusing all of your attention, earlier on you said 110% of your attention on this person, then that has some sort of a transformational effect through something that then operates through you.
Precisely, yes.
And there's nothing that you're adding, you're not thinking, you're not judging, you're not figuring it out.
No.
You're just acting as a lens.
Right. And the reason why it's necessary to do it that way is because to influence things on the planet, and especially with regards to human affairs, you need to be human, otherwise you're interfering. But as a human being, you can actually do things to influence and to interfere within humanity and within the collective. So it's like a little loop in the interference law, it's like a clause that one can use to make things happen.
Yes. So what I hear you saying there then is that as a human being, you're positioning yourself and focusing yourself, and then you become this lens, position yourself in the right place, and then something operates through you.
Yes.
And your function is basically to be that lens, and to move that lens, and to time that lens according to your instructions.
Yes.
And that there's no personality or ego attached to this at all. It's just a function.
Right, it's just a function. And on the other side of that lens is the other being. And that being has to have a free will connection with me. I cannot force myself on somebody. If negative, positive, whatever you want to call it, the color of their work here. I can't force that connection with somebody. There has to be a willingness on the other party to engage with me in some level.
When you would sit next to the girl on the park bench, would there be some kind of engagement there? Like hello or something, so that she acknowledges that you're there and it's okay to be there?
Right. You see, normally the agreement is at a higher level. So she would have agreed to have some sort of help at that moment. And she may have even have asked for help, prayed for help. And that help arrived.
Right. Yes. Yes,
but on a physical level, especially if I'm dealing with a light worker who's fully aware, I can only kind of make them know that I'm there, and then they have to invite. And then they have to ask, or agree with the interaction.
Yes. Well, let's just take this a step. This is so wonderful, interviewing someone who's telepathic, because you know exactly what I'm going to ask you now. When you were given me as a target, okay. Telepathy doesn't work with a video camera. You actually have to say something. You were given my name. Is this right?
Right.
Bill
Sometimes, yeah.
Bill Ryan, just
No,
like
just
that.
Bill.
Bill.
Bill and Avalon.
Bill and Avalon.
Yeah.
And this didn't mean anything to you.
No, nothing. I'd never heard of you before. I'm sorry. But that often happens. I will get a name, and what normally happens is it'll take me weeks to find it, to find the person or the relationship, because I get other clues as well. But with you, it's very quick, and normally when I find somebody very quickly, it's because it's urgent. It's make or break, somehow. I have no idea normally how, but sometimes I'm shown very graphically. And with you, I got Bill and Avalon. So I went on my computer, I put Bill Avalon, and your website came up. And your interview, the last interview you did, came up. So I joined your forum, and I put in a post that was meant to be a flag for you to see. It was a post that had energy behind it, so that it wouldn't be missed. But then you had to actually contact me, because I couldn't, go out of my way and say, I have to work with you, right?
Yes. You had to wait for me to approach you.
Yes.
Which is exactly what I did.
Right. Yeah. I can actually say, look, I'm here. That's what I can do, either by sending an email or a personal message, or putting a post to say, I'm here. And then the other person has to say, I'd like to see you, I'd like to contact you, I'd like to talk with you.
Yes. So the way that it operated me was a perfect case study of how you always work.
Yes, it was. Yes, yeah.
It is so astonishing.
Right.
And here we are. All right. And these assignments or missions or tasks, how many of these have you undertaken in your life?
It's impossible to say.
Hundreds? Thousands? How are we, a large?
Very large.
A very large number.
Yeah, yeah. And like I said, some of them are tiny, Some of them is just going somewhere and being somewhere, or saying something to somebody.
Just a little tiny thing that might
Right.
take a tiny part of one day.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
something else. I think you told me that there's some assignments that kind of go on
For years.
for a long time.
Yes, for years sometimes.
Do you have any understanding of why something would take a long time to resolve?
No, I've never looked at it. I've never had a curiosity of why something would be very quick and something wouldn't.
Because it's not your role to analyze anything.
Right. It is not my role to analyze it or be curious or try and connect the dots. That's done for me.
Yes. Are you curious, or do you sort of suppress your curiosity?
I'm really not.
You're really not
No.
curious?
No, it's just attention points. I mean, I have to have my focus on so many things that if I try to focus on curiosity as well, it's just, you can only do so many things. But it's entertaining, and it's fun when the proof comes through, or the synchronicities come through that show why and hows and all the other pieces. Because you see, I'm not working by myself. This is all orchestrated by a higher beings or self or whatever, the universe. And there's thousands upon thousands of people on the planet doing what I'm doing. And there's thousands and thousands of others, millions of others who are doing other stuff that I couldn't even go near, but have a part in what I'm doing.
What's the best way you can describe whoever or whatever it is that you get your information from, like you're targeting information from? What is all that about? What is this source of information, direction, whatever?
It comes through various different levels. One of them that I can describe very quickly, because I have a focus on both, is the formlessness of oneness, which is part of all, right? Like the divine source.
The ultimate unity.
Right, right. That's outside of time-space. And it would be like a spark of that came in to do a certain work. But the reason it did, you see, because it has no attachment really to what really happens on the planet, if you think about it. And the attachment or the request came in from other beings and level people. Like there was a big call from the planet as an entity and light beings within the planet saying, help, right? To do this, we need help. And that call went out. And it wasn't just a planetary call, it was also from other beings around in the galaxy, which will be affected by what happens on the planet. Maybe not today, but maybe in 1,000,000 years. And that call was like huge, a huge call from sentient consciousness to have some sort of intervention on the planet, to allow it in this timeline, to allow it to make the shift that it's supposed to make, and it's trying to be stopped by the negativity. So it was a huge call, and that's why beings like myself can come into time-space and do this, because it's a response to that call. The planet has a trajectory that it's following naturally. It's an evolutionary trajectory.
You mean of like the culture, the civilization, the people who live there?
Everything.
Okay.
The plants, the rocks, the water, the people, the whole thing is one entity. Even though people think, oh, we are on the planet and we were put here, so we're not really off the planet. That's an illusion, because they're made of what the planet's made out of, physically speaking. Like the flesh is made out of the same material. It came from the planet, is being fed by the planet, is part of the planet. It's all an integrated one being with different levels of consciousness inside it, including the human collective and other collectives from other sentient beings that are on the planet and have been here for millions of years. And this planet as a unit has a trajectory of evolution. And what's been happening is that this particular juncture and in this particular timeline, there's forces who are trying to stop that evolution because it's not profitable for it to evolve in their view, right?
Okay.
And then we come into like laws of existence. For this to exist, you have laws. You have the law of free will, for example, that's being violated all over the place in this planet. You have the law of time-space, the trajectory that most people would experience as linear time is a law. And laws are kind of agreed rules that the being comes in to play a game.
The rules of the game.
Right. So if all of a sudden the rules are being violated, the majority of players can turn around and say, bring in a referee because this is an unfair game.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yes. This is fascinating because many years ago I knew somebody who was doing something very similar to what you were doing, and he called himself an arbiter.
Yes.
And he referred to a number of other arbiters that he was aware of.
Yeah.
And this is a whole conversation we haven't had yet.
Mm.
He was the most wonderful man, and he said he'd get quite a kick out of the situation where he'd just roll up in a particular situation psychically, and then these nasty evil beings would just take one look at him and run. And of course, you'd always go and get them.
Right.
You know, there's a whole story that we can tell. But that was my first. See, this is quite interesting. This is my first experience with somebody like that, and I was instrumental in supporting him in attaining the abilities which he was then able to use. I mean, he ended a war, for example, single-handedly. It's a whole story about how he did all that. Back to where we were talking about you were coming in to handle a situation where rules had been violated,
right,
or where agreements had been violated. Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah, basically what's happening on the planet right now is extremely negative, and well, on a physical level, there's a violation of free will, because if you keep a collective asleep, what decisions they make is being influenced by those who are awake, and it's not really free will.
It's a bit like stopping people from voting.
Right.
Yes, sure.
Or, yeah, just taking their bodies over like they're sleeping and doing it for them, you know? So that's not really free will. So that's one of the things that's being violated. And then all the wars and all the other negativity, fear. The vibration of fear is what's the makeup or the building block of negativity. And the planet's being bombarded, the planet's humans, the collective, is being bombarded with fear by a very few people on the planet, right? Like the ruling elite are bombarding the entire population, the entire planet with fear through television, through wars, through crime, perpetuating all these things, even music. And that's also a violation of what's supposed to happen here.
Right.
It's like a complete bombardment.
Right. So your role basically is a bit like a referee or an umpire in a game. It's to make sure that the game is played fairly and according to the rules, and if anyone is transgressing those rules, then
Foul.
they're kind of right, then they're brought into line.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And every now and then you send someone off the pitch.
Right.
Okay. So you're talking about within the context of a setup of a particular game that's got some kind of boundaries
Right.
or delineation to it, that whatever the game is, then your role is to ensure that that game is played as it was originally conceived and agreed to be played by the players.
Right, unless the players all agree that they want to change the game.
I understand. Okay.
And there wasn't an agreement on the planet. And this planet does not want to be in the negativity anymore.
I got that. Okay, okay. Now, is this, do you think, a one-off intervention? Is this about changing timelines, and that once those points are switched on the railroad track, then beings like you with a functionality like you will no longer have to be here?
Yes.
That's a good answer.
And it is about timelines, because there's other timelines in this planet that this is not happening. And there's timelines where everything is resolved already.
Does that mean then that in those other timelines the parallel Inelia isn't there, because she doesn't have to be?
Right.
Okay. So in all of these parallel realities, Inelia is only here in those versions of reality where she's needed,
Right.
where things haven't got screwed up. Or sorry, where things have got screwed up, whereas other places they haven't.
Right, but there's different levels.
Okay.
And this is something, when I first came in as this timeline, in this timeline, because again you have that multiplicity of beings in different timelines. When I first came in and I became aware that I was in time-space, there was certain things I wasn't sure about. One of them was whereabouts in the shift I was. Was it before, during, or after the shift? I didn't know. And the other one was, which timeline am I in? How severe is it? You know, what's going on in this timeline? I didn't know either. And I found out when I was 3, and I wanted out. I totally had what you might call a toddler nervous breakdown. When I found out there were still wars on the planet, I realized, it just dawned on me which timeline I was in. And it's one of the worst, you know, they still have wars here. And I completely broke down. I started crying, and I cried for 3 or 4 days. They had to take me to the doctor, give me an injection, put me to sleep for another few days or whatever. And then I woke up and it was like, I don't know if I can do this. It was honestly that thought at that time. I honestly didn't think I would be able to do it.
At the age of 3?
Yeah.
And you remember this totally clearly now, looking back?
Oh, I've never forgotten it. It used to be a point of humor in my family, you know. How many 3-year-olds do have a nervous breakdown when they find there's war still going on in the planet? It wasn't something that was easily forgotten.
Do you remember every detail of your infancy?
Not anymore, not anymore. I used to have complete recall about everything that happened, and every book I read, if I had read a book 10 years ago, you could hold the book in your hands, open any page, give me the page number, and I would recite it. I had that type of memory, but I dropped that at some point. I have no idea why. Maybe it was just getting overcrowded up there, you know. So I can actually look back, if I'm given a time and date, I can look back and probably find it, but now it's lack of interest, perhaps, I don't know, but I don't have full recall of everything that happened anymore.
And your overall task, your overall life mission here, to what degree is it successful, or being successful, or on the way to being successful? How can you measure how well you're doing, or how well we're all doing with your support?
I suppose there are times when I could help somebody and they don't make the agreement, they don't reach out back. And I do get a moment of, I wish they had. It would make things a lot easier for the planet if they had, you know. I can't name people because that would put them in a situation where that free will is then violated, because they chose not to engage at some level.
Is it possible that that's a question of timing, and you might come back to them and see whether they might engage later?
I actually do.
Right.
I do try every year, or depending, when I'm told try again, I will actually present myself there to see if they're ready or whatever, and, you know.
So you've got a kind of small number of pending missions that you haven't been able to progress.
Exactly,
sort of.
yes. However, on the ones that I have been able to make full contact, each one has been very successful. And
overall, in terms of the total context for all of this, which is
the planet,
changing the timeline and
yes.
and restoring free will and self-determinism to the citizens of the planet, how far on track are we? Can we measure this? Are we doing well?
We're doing extremely well, way beyond any expectations, and also it's wide open right now. It's wide open. There are no limits of how much it can be accomplished.
So it's wide open in terms of the degree of positive potential.
Right.
There is, that's what
yes.
you mean. Not in terms of whether we're going to make it or whether we're not.
Oh no, we are going to make it.
Okay. Right.
And how rough that's going to be and how hard it's going to be for the majority of people on the planet is still open. It's not going to be as bad as it could have been, right? Mm-hmm. But how bad it gets, it really depends on the collective. It really depends on each individual choosing to process their fear. And each person that does it, each person that decides not to engage in that fear, adds a little bit more higher vibration to the planet and affects it for hundreds of others.
Right. So you're saying that we're definitely going to make it.
Yes.
As it were, but the unknown variable is exactly how rough a ride it's going to be.
Yes, and that's going to be decided by the collective.
Right.
It's what the collective needs, it's going to be what happens.
Does that mean that we have changed the timeline? Or is that too simplistic, because it's like a question of which timeline we're on?
Right.
It depends on...
individual.
Let me start that sentence again. Is a question of we could be on any number of different timelines, and some of them are rougher than others, but they're all kind of going to end up in the right place.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so each individual on the planet has control over their own timeline. And that's one of the things that they don't want you to know. Because if the person is able to change their timeline, they're not going to choose one where they're enslaved for the rest of their life. They're going to choose one where they can manifest whatever they like and live wherever they like and have a beautiful life.
Right.
So when we're talking about have we changed the timeline, the correct question would be, have I changed my timeline? And joining those others that want the same timeline that I want.
Now I've got the visual metaphor of in inverted commas, the timeline as actually being this big braided rope made out of millions of little threads, which are intertwined in any number of different permutations to make a timeline.
Yes.
And each one of us create that thread as we wish, and align ourselves with others who are creating their threads as they wish.
Exactly. And if you have a conscious choosing of that thread and threading and joining, you no longer have enslavement. It's impossible. You no longer have wars unless there's a group of people who really into war games, and they can create their own timeline together.
Wow. That's a moderately staggering thought, I have to say. In a previous conversation we had just the other day, you kind of put a percentage on it. You said that it was 70% handled. And that might not even have been exactly what you said. What were you referring to there?
A smooth transition without chaos and like millions of lives being lost.
Ah, okay, I've got you. All right. So that's 70% is on the kind of smooth, rough spectrum.
Right.
Okay. But actually you're saying the overall outcome is assured.
Absolutely, yeah.
Am I right in understanding that when you came here a few decades ago, the outcome was not assured, and since then conditions have changed, and now it is assured?
Yes.
Okay. And in putting it together like that, I'm not trying to simplify things in such a crude way as to saying that you alone have done this. You said earlier you wanted to point out that of course you haven't. This is a whole movement, it's a whole concert, it's a whole team-working effort with tens of thousands of people involved, and we'll never know most of them. I would
say millions.
Yes, all in different ways.
Right.
There are beings who are incarnating here from everywhere and
in the known universe.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah, from the universe, from outside of the universe,
right.
and from the next door planet. I mean, all kinds of things are happening here. And many of the people watching this may have had personal encounters with some of those beings. They may well be those beings themselves.
Right.
They may be those beings themselves and they don't even realize it, and this video is going to wake them up. Maybe. Yes. How about that? Because here we have the interesting opportunity of, rather than you sitting next to someone on a park bench or going to visit some evil dark despot on his throne in his mansion personally, you can actually do this virtually through this video by representing your presence.
Right.
With everyone who watches this, tens of thousands of people, and maybe this
Yes.
is why we're doing it.
There's no coincidence that you're watching this video right now.
There's no escape. That's. I mean, I have to say that thought only just occurred to me, but there could be something in this, couldn't there? So, Inelia, now it's a couple of weeks later. There's something else as well which might be useful to address, because in the interview you talked about parallel timelines, about different alternative realities, that to some degree we have a choice about what to experience. And right now things are very confusing because there's a lot of information. You get prophecies and predictions and visions and dreams, and people thinking, oh my God, this is going to happen and that's going to happen, and people who've been told things by astral beings and ETs, and then these things don't happen. And what does this mean? What advice can you give to anyone who's worried about what it is that they have been told will happen or might happen?
There's an aspect of that that's really interesting, because when the information is given out, collectively we choose to agree on it or not agree on it. So the first thing I would say would be not to agree on it.
What would you say to people who've watched everything so far and they just cannot believe what you're saying? They can't believe that you're real because there's so much stuff out there that isn't real or that is delusional. And they're thinking, you know what, I'm just going to move on to something else because this is crazy stuff.
I would like to acknowledge that reality, and I think you've taken the perfect path, which is to go and look somewhere else, because I am not real to you, and I will never be real to you. And I agree, you're absolutely right.
Or you may become real when they watch it a second time.
Perhaps. And then the reality will be shifted.
Okay. And I know that there's something else that you wanted to mention too. This is the possibility that there's a misunderstanding, that people are kind of thinking that you're some kind of a miracle worker who waves your magic wand and fixes things, and you can take orders and fix things for people, and that you make decisions about what to do and what not to do, and so on and so forth. And there's a whole clarification about that it might be useful for you to underline.
Yes, I never choose who I work with. That comes through my higher self or divine intervention, or whatever you want to call it, right? But basically, what I'm concentrating on is the collective. So if you do feel that I have something that I can offer you, you can go into my website and there's stuff there, there's a ton of information, exercises and things you can do. But I'm not working with people individually anymore, because this is a different time. It's not about what Inelia can do for you. It's about you stepping up to the call. You know, this is a call of action, and that's why I agreed to do this interview, and saying, how can I, as a viewer, how can I step up and help on this work, right? Where's your joy? Where's your passion? Follow it.
So you're not a fixer, you're a catalyst, right?
Yes, a catalyst. That would be a good word for it. A catalyst. And you can become the catalyst, you see. It's just, how do you do it, right? And it's about that. It's about raising your own personal vibration, and you will become a catalyst yourself.
So we can all be each other's catalysts.
Absolutely.
And this is the potential synergy that's there.
Oh, yes.
Because it's a problem, isn't it, that people are always looking for someone to rescue them, to do something for them, to save them, to lift them out of this. They're waiting for a rapture, they're waiting for God to help them, or the ETs to help them. And the last thing you want is for you to step into this role, because that's not what you're here for.
I'm not going to do it. And one of the things is that that's not the person's fault, because that's the way that the program has been downloaded, so that the elite can have absolute control, right? Because then you disempower a person so much that they don't realize they can help themselves, you see. But they can, every individual can do it. Every individual can not only be a catalyst for their own life, but for everybody else around them too.
So this sounds like one of your most important messages. Anyone has access to what you have been gifted to have access to. That no one needs anyone's permission to start work and start fixing things. No one even needs to be organized, or no one needs to wait for somebody to say, okay, this is the starting gun, let's go. You're just encouraging people to empower themselves and to get on with whatever it is that they came here for.
Absolutely, yes. And another point here is that we all came in with all these abilities, right? And through programming and through our upbringing, cultural situation or whatever, we've lost it on the way. I've lost several of my abilities myself, and I personally have to work on either getting them back or finding out why not, right?
So it's all there, and if something's been lost, it hasn't really been lost. It's been temporarily mislaid, and all you've got to do is find it again.
That's right, yeah. You have to find it again. However, the important aspect about all these things is that it's not about moving chairs across the room. It's not about reading people's minds. It's not about healing the sick. It's about your own growth in awareness and higher vibration, that you can make yourself vibrate the highest that you possibly can. And these things will come in, right? All of a sudden, people will start feeling better near you, and all of a sudden you'll be able to do and be able to be more efficient through these skills in raising the vibration of the planet or making it a better world, which is another way of saying it. But if you go out and become obsessed with moving a table across the room, that's not, I mean, maybe, yes, possibly, and there's people who can do it. You'll be able to do it eventually. But how does that help? You know, you could have just stood up and grabbed the table and moved it across the room. How is that going to help the planet, right?
For me, quite a good analogy is in Star Wars. There's so much truth in that wonderful movie. And you have little Yoda, who has all these powers, and he shows Luke how he can lift his craft out of the swamp with his abilities to remotely levitate it. But that's not what the movie's about. The movie is about the power of the Force, and the movie is about how to defeat the dark side and how to recover one's own abilities to harness them with others in order to defeat the Empire.
Absolutely,
so to speak.
yes.
And it's not about the magic tricks.
No, it's not about the magic tricks.
The magic tricks are fun, and they're a side effect, and they're absolutely not important.
Not important, no.
And for anyone who's remotely interested, behind the camera here, I, as Bill Ryan, I can't do any magic tricks whatsoever, but that doesn't matter. I can still be a fully fledged participant in this transformational process, and all I need to do is operate a camera, and that's...
That's exactly. You don't need special powers to click, you know, record.
I can do it with my own hands. I don't need to do it with my thought.
Exactly.
Exactly. Is there anything else that you want to say as a final message to the people watching this? There'll be more videos to come, there'll be more information, there'll be personal presentations. Are you going to be giving any workshops, conferences?
Possibly, yes. Mm. Yeah.
So this isn't going to be the last that people are going to see of you?
No, no.
That's something for us to look forward to. My sense here, if I can share my personal thoughts about this, is that this is an exciting journey that's just starting. And I encourage anyone who's watching this who has that sense also that this is an exciting journey that's just starting. Even if it may have felt to you personally that it started maybe a few years ago, it's still just starting. There's a lot of work to do, there's a lot of people to share this journey with, and there's a lot of fun to be had and a lot of important work to do.
Yes, it is. And it's not just about what's going to happen in the next 2-3 years, and it's not about all the disasters that are happening around the planet. It's not about that. It's what happens afterwards, you know.
It's what happens afterwards.
Yeah.
And it would be quite all right with you if there were no disasters whatsoever.
Absolutely. Let's agree on that one.
We're living in a strange time, working for a strange goal. We're living in a strange time, we're working for a strange goal. We're turning flesh and body into soul.
Apart from probably to fulfill the needs of the ego. And as you listen to Inelia telling her story, you will see that there is very, very little ego there. She tells her story in a very matter-of-fact way, that you too can do exactly as she does. You too have these capacities for changing the universe around you. And you too have the capacity, as she says, to create your own timeline. You can create your own future. And between us, taking full responsibility and standing in our own power, we can create the world that we want. Thank you. So this is Bill Ryan from Project Avalon, and it is the 10th of March 2011, and I'm here with Inelia. And Inelia, could you possibly say your most wonderful melodic family name that I'm incapable of pronouncing?
Okay. My full name is Inelia del Pilar Ahumada Avila, and I'm also known as Inelia Benz.
All right. And you were born in Chile, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And then, to cut a very long story short, which is a different story, you left Chile as a refugee.
Right. Yes.
And ended up in England, is that correct?
we moved to Nottingham in England, and I kind of grew up there. I was there for quite a few years, and then I moved to Ireland for 9 years, and I went to college in Ireland, and then I went back to Chile for a couple of years as an adult to sort out some family properties and things. Then I went to live in Spain for a few years, and then back to England, and I've been in the United States now for 6 years.
And how is all this possible, given that you look as if you're 22 years old?
Oh, okay. Well, you don't ask a lady her age, so I'm not going to tell you. But I'm not young.
You're not
but thank
young.
you very much.
Okay. So, the reason why I'm talking to you here and would love to see whether we can describe some of the things that you have been doing and being in language so that people can understand it. You, may I say it, are one of the more extraordinary people I've ever met, and I've met quite a few extraordinary people. And from what I can gather, you wouldn't even really describe yourself as a person in a funny kind of way. Now that's going to sound weird to the people watching this.
Right, yes. Yeah, because when I look at a person or I look at people on Earth, normally, and this is not always the case, there would have been a soul or like a spark of divinity entering the time-space line, and it would have gone from complete oneness to a period of maybe thousands, I don't know how many lifetimes, developing into an individual and developing into a sentient being, which is separate from oneness. And this, when I look at people on the planet,
We're living in a strange time, working for a strange goal. We're living in a strange time, we're working for a strange goal. We're turning flesh and body into soul.
Hi there, this is Bill Ryan from Project Avalon. And the video you're about to see is an interview with a most remarkable woman who I've come to know recently and has become a close friend. And the subject of the interview is her mission to this planet and the abilities that she possesses, which are extraordinary and significant. And in the 2 hours which follows, she details what she can do, what she has done, the fun and the problems that she experienced when she was a little girl, and what she is doing responsibly with her considerable powers right now. And it's the most extraordinary story that I recommend you listen to right to the end. The reason why I'm giving this little introduction right now is because it's really important to emphasize that the most extraordinary psychic abilities which are recounted in this interview, they are not the gifts of an extraordinarily special person which we can't possibly aspire to. These gifts are innate in all human beings. This is Inelia's message to us. She claims that although she comes from an unusual place, let us say, and this is an unusual mission, it's an unusual lifetime, the gifts that she possesses are human ones. And a message that she wants us all to understand is that these gifts are our birthright, that the controllers of the planet do not want us to know that we have, and they use them, of course, themselves. The other important note to the interview is that magic, for lack of a better word, is interesting and spectacular and as fascinated human beings for generations, for thousands of years, for understandable reasons. It's not an end in itself. It's important to understand that, as Inelia says in her interview, these abilities will be gained as byproducts by anyone who is on a genuine spiritual path. And, of course, many of the great masters in many traditions will attest to that. They're interesting, but they're not an end in itself, and they're not to be attained as a goal in themselves. That would be a trap. That's a dead end. That actually goes nowhere. Several weeks now, and we haven't got to the end of those stories yet. There are so many of them. One of them that I think is a really neat story is when you were a little girl and you kept on falling over.
Yes. One of the things that I tried to do, because you have to understand, I came in like half an hour before the body was born. And then there had to be a body agreement for me to come in, because it wasn't your regular incarnation where the soul would be there waiting for the body, or like there's a link between the two and everything. And there was this moment of asking for agreement from the body to take this on, to it's like, shall we do this? And there was a definite yes, but it was completely different to how I see humans functioning, because I came in and I had no idea how to drive the body, right? So the body kind of intelligence went into the physical body to animate it, to make it alive, and to make it function and breathe and everything else. And I was kind of outside, and I wanted to do stuff with this body, but I didn't know how. I didn't have the manual. And when I looked into it, it was like a computer that needed to be programmed, right? It needed to learn how to move its arms, grab things, be able to speak and communicate, move the head sideways when I was interested in something that was going on there. And I didn't know how to move this little body's head that way so I could see it, right? And stuff like that. But from that moment, I was not inside the vision, the visuals were outside the body on the back of the head from that moment. And the only thing that changed was that I was trying to move the arms like a puppet, and it just wasn't working, and the body was complaining. So it kind of told me, no, you have to go in and move the arms from within, kind of thing, like getting into a suit. So I did that, but I didn't do it from a viewpoint. I didn't do my viewpoint. I just did like an energy entering, so I was able to move the arms and legs, and it was like programming the body how to function and stuff like that. Very mechanical. It was literally like writing a program on a computer. For me, that's how it was. And the years went by, and I used to see everything. I had a 360 degree and up and down visual of everything that was going on around me. And I kept falling over time and again, because my viewpoint was around here, so I couldn't see what was in front of me as I was walking in the street, for example, and because the head was on the way, right? So I kept falling over, and I had continuously, my knees were always bleeding, and my face was always smashed, my lips were always fat, because I kept falling on my head. And then one day my mom says, why can't you use your eyes? Just use your eyes, look at what's in front of you. So I said to her, well, I can't, because when I looked through my eyes, it was like two tiny little pinpricks that you can only see a tiny little bit of what's going on. And then she says, well, what are you doing now? So I said, well, I can see everything. This has happened sometimes on planet Earth. A lot of people have done the entire trajectory on the planet Earth. And now we are seeing like thousands, if not millions, of people who have done their trajectories in other planets and now are incarnated on Earth to experience this amazing stuff that's going on right now here. And so I would consider one of these souls that have evolved throughout time and space to become a sentient and evolved being as a person or a being, right? And I wouldn't describe myself as such, because I came in directly without any evolution into this state to be able to do a particular job on the planet right now. And once that job is gone, that individuality, that singularity that is this person that you're seeing, we no longer exist. So the concept of a person or a soul is not there.
Okay, so one or two people who followed this may already be doing a double take. You're not only saying that you haven't been here on this planet before, ever incarnated, but you haven't been anywhere in the physical universe ever before, or anywhere in the whole matrix of existence, as it were, before. You are absolutely new here.
Correct. Yeah, I entered the time-space matrix, that's, you know, that's a good word, half an hour before I was born.
Right. And you know, this is what you've told me when we've talked about this off camera, that you will not be incarnating again. You're here on a specific, dare I call it a mission?
Yes, you could call it a mission. Yeah.
So you're here to get some things done that need to be done.
Right.
And you have come directly from, here we're struggling with words, you come directly from source, directly from unity, directly here into a human body, and are therefore operating in a very different way than human beings do, who have been here for millions of lifetimes.
Yes, yes. And my entire early trajectory and still going on, something that's still continuing, is learning or being able to function within an individual viewpoint, an individual body, and within time-space in a linear manner, and dealing with that, being able to function within it, because that's where the job is at. So my trajectory has been to learn how to do that, rather than what people would normally think us the other way around, you know.
And that must have been extraordinarily challenging, to come in from nowhere and no when, directly into being a very young human girl on this strange planet Earth, with no manual guidelines or information about how it is you were meant to be, or what you were meant to be.
Yeah, there was definitely a challenge, and the main challenge was the reaction of others around me towards me. Okay, so for example, I did have some tools. I did come in with some tools. I was able to download information. So if I didn't understand something, normally I would be able to just step into the collective and get it. I was speaking, according to one of my aunts, I was talking like completely perfect Spanish. It was in fact, didn't even have a Chilean accent when I was 9 months old, which for her, she was totally freaked out about it, but nobody else seemed to take any notice. And that was because I was trying to understand what people were saying or what they were trying to communicate, and I couldn't. So I simply downloaded the language and used it, you know. So I can't do that anymore with languages, unfortunately. I don't, you know, there's one of those things that I can't do, but for other things I can. And growing up, I think that was part of the way things work, that I was able to, the things that I needed, I get. But if I'm doing something just because, or, you know, because it's something that I'm interested in, but it's not needed, then I can't do it.
If it's necessary, you'll download the program that you need in order to do the job.
Right.
But if you're just curious, then it doesn't work.
It doesn't work.
Okay.
It doesn't happen.
I remember there was a time that you told me a couple of weeks ago about, there was once when you found yourself, when you were told that you were speaking perfect Portuguese, another time when you were told that you were speaking Russian,
right,
and you didn't even realize it.
Yeah, to me, I was speaking English, right? For me, when I look back and I look at my memory, I'm speaking in English, but to the witnesses, I was speaking this other language, which for me is like, okay, I take their word, and I've read about it, and I've found out that there's other people that can do that type of thing, but it's like evidence from somewhere else, you know. It's like, it's not something I can say, yeah, I can do that, because as far as I was concerned, I was speaking English, so.
Yes, sure. It
Yeah.
wasn't even conscious.
No, and it's always been a situation where the other person needs help.
Okay.
So it was like a person who was very sick. He had a terminal illness. That was the first time that it was seen. And apparently I was talking to this person in Portuguese for hours and I had no idea. And other people, again, they were coming in for help or advice. And the last time it was very simple. It was somebody in the metro in Madrid who were lost.
Mm-hmm.
They were in the metro and they were completely lost, this family. And I went to help them. And I started giving them directions, showing them how to use the map and where they had to go and everything, and send them on their merry way, say goodbye, turned around, and the person who was with me says, "Did you know where did you learn Russian? Did you know you were talking in Russian?" I said, "No."
It's
So
it's a wonderful
Yeah.
story. There's another wonderful story which I invite you to tell. And I have to say here on record that I've been talking with Inelia about her experiences for